combine small town roots with business savvy, and you've got the Rural Rundown podcast. We're sharing our marketing and branding strategies, tips, and tricks that rural businesses can use to educate, inspire, and entertain their customers, and to help you make sales and hit profit goals. So what does it take to go from your mom is your only fan to famous in a small town? Tune in and listen up as we feature business owners and organizations that are doing big things in their community and creating opportunities for generations to come. Hi, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Rural Rundown podcast. Rachel and I are here today, and we had a really fun guest today. Rachel, talk to me a little bit about what you thought was your best part of the conversation today with Coach Kiah.
I really liked talking to Coach Kiah about her phrase, compassionate curiosity. I thought that was really interesting and really cool. Like when you hear it, you kind of think like, what does that mean? And she really gave a really good like breakdown of it. And the other part I really liked about what she shared was she kind of walked through when somebody comes and follows her for the first time and might be a good fit for what she does for coaching. It takes about 6 months. And she really shares like how she walks them through and nurtures them if they are right for her or if they aren't. And I think that is something all businesses it can apply. So what about you? What kind of was the best part for you?
Yeah, I loved when she talked about mindset and her whole everything she does in her coaching is really based around mindset and the mindset that people have. So what she's talking about is like she does a lot of life coaching, weight loss coaching, and she talks about her health journey a lot after she's lost over 120 pounds. But even in our everyday life or our business lives, when we are focused on our mindset and our how we think about things, maybe we're journaling, maybe we're meditating, maybe we're manifesting, sometimes it can be really hard to get other people on board with your mindset or with your manifestations, especially when it comes to maybe your business partner, your life partner, your husband, your wife, whatever it may be. So I loved the conversation we had about that and kind of navigating how you go about doing those things when something's so passionate for you, your business, your entrepreneurship journey, your side hustle, maybe it's not as important to others, maybe how you can navigate that a little bit. So I loved that conversation that we had.
Yeah, I feel like that's the first time I've ever really heard that or even talked about that topic with anyone or heard it. So I think that'll be really interesting for a lot of people.
I think so too. So for anybody who doesn't know Coach Kiah, she is a life coach, wellness coach, health. I think she says a lot. She's like, I'm not like a health fitness coach, but mindset and life coach. She is a California cattle rancher. She is the 2020 Beef Advocate of the World Year. She won that award from the Cattlemen's Association, and she just has a lot of great stuff to say about owning businesses, navigating this entrepreneurship journey. She's been through her own kind of like twists and turns of a journey to get from the 9 to 5 to where she is now as a life coach. And she chatted with us and shared all those things. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Coach Kiah.
My name is Kiah Twistleman-Burchett. Still getting used to my new last name. I got married in May of 2021. I am maybe better known as Coach Kiah these days. I like to say that I am a California cattle rancher turned accidental life coach. And it all really happened after embarking on my own personal development and health journey, losing over 100 pounds and really sharing that story along the way and having it kind of manifest itself into this career that I never intended to have, but I am so grateful for every single day. I grew up on a ranch in rural California, so I have very deep agricultural roots. I'm 6th generation and my nieces are now the 7th. And so I feel so passionately about the ag industry, and I have since I was a little girl. And I really started my professional career in agriculture, specifically in ag communications. I have this love of agriculture and this love of people. And I felt like ag communications was really the perfect place for me to blend the two. And now with what I do as a life coach, it's been really fun to kind of discover this new passion of mine and also rethinking the way that I really find my place inside of the agriculture community. While maybe I'm not as involved on the production side of things as I was growing up, while maybe I'm not as involved in communication specifically as I was when I started my career. Now I feel like I have this incredible opportunity to really empower the women and men within the agriculture industry to live their happiest, healthiest lives. And that feels like the greatest gift and such a cool full circle way for me to continue to serve the agriculture community in a new way.
Absolutely. That is so fun. I feel like that's so perfect. I met you, well, we are like Instagram friends, really. So I
That's how
met
everyone
you right
becomes
when you were,
friends, right?
I know, like seriously, especially like 2021, like after the pandemic. um, and you were like just making the transition from the Kentucky Beef Council to like moving and like running your own business. And I know recently you've been talking about your transitions through business and kind of how that ebbs and flows. Can you give us like the short like version of like what it's been like to transition from like working for somebody else to working for yourself to now doing this life coaching?
Man, it has been quite the learning curve, I've got to say. I never really intended when I was younger. I never set out to be an entrepreneur, really. I kind of honestly like the whole employee thing, like show up to work, do my job, get a paycheck, leave. But what I also found with being an employee was that it wasn't giving me the time freedom and the financial freedom that I want. I was really drawn towards entrepreneurship while I was living in Kentucky, because I was over 2,000 miles away from my family. And my oldest niece was born the week that I moved to Kentucky. And I was so hungry for freedom and flexibility. And I thought, you know what? I want to be able to hop on a plane and go visit my niece for her birthday whenever I want to. I want to be able to dictate how much money I make, which has its own hardships. It's kind of nice having a steady paycheck. I do miss that sometimes, but it was really this hunger for freedom that really got me looking into entrepreneurship. And when I started as an entrepreneur, I was working full time for the Kentucky Beef Council as the director of consumer affairs, and I loved that job. And I was gaining so many skills while working that job, one of which being marketing and communications. And I thought, okay, I want to have more freedom and flexibility. Maybe I can start a side hustle with the hope one day that I could take it full time and be my own boss. So my first job, or my first, I guess, business that I started was called Burley and Barley, creative and editorial. And it was Burley after my husband, who grew up on a Burley tobacco farm in Western Kentucky, and Barley because on my family's cattle ranch, we also raised barley. So it was like this nod towards our agriculture roots. And we primarily did graphic designs, logos, social media consulting, and I got into watercolor illustration for a lot of small businesses, farms, and ranches across the country. And it was so much fun. I learned so much. And I also learned how freaking hard entrepreneurship is. OMG. but I really, really enjoyed it. And I just kept learning and growing. And there was a job that opened up back in my home county of California for the executive director of our local county farm bureau. And I convinced my boyfriend, now husband at the time, by some miracle to apply. And I should have known it was love right then and there because he was willing to leave the South, which is not easy to convince a Southern boy to do. But we moved to California long before I was really ready to take the leap into full-time entrepreneurship. But I'm so grateful that Brent kind of carried the financial load for a little while for me to kind of get my feet and footing of entrepreneurship. And so I went I dove headfirst into entrepreneurship with Burley and Barley and was really growing it and enjoying it. But all of a sudden, all of this creativity and drawing and graphic design started to feel a lot more like work than it did fun, which I think is part of just being a business owner in general. But I was getting really burnt out. And at the same time, that's when I was sharing on my personal social media more about this health journey that I was on from this mindset first approach. And people kept asking me questions and asking, how did you do it? Like, do you take on clients? Are you doing any coaching on the side? And at the time I was like, who am I to be a coach? Like I have zero credentials, but I'm a yes girl. So I decided to test it out with just some friends on the side. And so all of a sudden I had a side hustle to my now full-time entrepreneur job. And I fell in love with coaching. I fell in love with it. It felt like it took so much less of my mental energy to generate more money. And I thought, okay, maybe this is a new direction for me to go as entrepreneurship, which was scary in itself to think, am I throwing away everything that I built by pivoting from my creative business towards my coaching business? And thanks to some really great media exposure that I had in 2020 and really building up my client coaching list, I decided to go ahead and take the leap and become a full-time coach in July of 2020.
That's awesome. That's a trip too. Like that's a lot of twists and turns. Like which I think is normal. I don't think it's like abnormal, but it's like for somebody who's starting out on an entrepreneurial journey, it can seem daunting. But in the end, I feel like you get to this place where you're like, yeah, this is where I was meant to be.
Yeah. And I feel like, as a yes girl, even in Burley and Barley, I feel like I tried to have 12 different jobs in that role. Like I tested the waters of doing graphic design, and then I started doing watercolor illustration, and I did some freelance journalism, and I did some photography, and I did some website design. Like I really dabbled in a bunch of different things. And at the time, I think my husband was a little frustrated with me, like, Kiah, pick one freaking thing and
Yeah.
get good at it instead of like hopping from one thing to the next. But looking back, I'm so grateful that I gave myself permission to explore, because had I not, I might have just committed to doing something that I didn't really love, that I wasn't really good at. And I'm really happy that I gave myself the flexibility and freedom to kind of try things out and explore that. And at the time, I felt like, gosh, am I throwing all of this away that I've built? It was like, I felt like I was climbing up a mountain, getting halfway up to the peak and looking down and being like, holy crap, I think I'm on the wrong mountain. And part of me was worried that it was going to be wasted time. But what's so cool now in my coaching business, before I hopped on this call with you, I am putting together my first ever merchandise for my coaching business. And I now get to use my own creativity and graphic design and watercolor illustrations in my own coaching business. And so kind of recognizing too how, whether it was starting my job in ag communications, working for the Beef Council, or doing creative design, all of those pieces are now serving me in the role that I have now. I just didn't realize how those skills were going to create something new at the time.
I love that. I feel like when you're talking, I can tell you're a very passionate person. So in each role that you were in during this journey, you were passionate about it, and you probably like thought, I was going to stay there and do that forever. But then it changed, and you had that like ability to let it change and learn from it. And now look, it's all coming with you. I think that's a really, really cool story.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I feel like just knowing how much has changed just in the last 3 to 5 years, it also makes me so curious of like, what the heck are the next 3 to 5 years going to look like if things keep moving? Like, how is my business that I know of now, how is it going to change and evolve? I'm so curious to see how it pans out, because I know for sure that it's going to change in some way.
Yeah. I want to talk about two things. I feel like we should have Oli on the podcast someday because I always like go back to this, but constantly he's telling me the same thing. Like, and people say it all the time. A lot of business coaches, like the riches are in the niches, right? So niche down, get into one thing, focus on one thing, get really good at it before you move to the next. But I'm the same way where I'm like, no, I want to be a creative agency where I offer web design and graphic design and brand strategy and video. And then I think when you get to that point too, you can see what you can let fall behind. Like, so I don't think I'm great at photography. There's other people who are way better than I am, and like Oli kind of complements that with like what I've got going on. So I'm fortunate enough to be like, well, I don't have to offer photography anymore. Like I can outsource that to other people. Or like writing creatively, like that takes a lot out of a person too, like the editorial side of things. So I feel my advice is like when you explore all of the options, then you can decide like what you're passionate about and what you're really good at. But without like doing those, like if you niche down too soon, then like how do you ever know if you would have been better at something else, or if something else would have been like a better income generator for you? So like yeah, I go against the grain a little bit when people talk about like niching down, because I feel like I'm in the same spot you were in, where it's like, no, but well, I can do all of the things.
Mhm.
And it's like, I see that even with like art projects I have scattered around my house too, where I'm like, oh, but I would love to make clay earrings. And I'm like, stop. Like, you do not need to do all the things.
I feel like
I
there's
love
value
that.
in that though, because if you like when you're talking about you kind of had your hands in all the processes of things, you know what it entails and what it takes. So if when you can delegate it or drop it, like you have like some sort of expectation on how it can be done. So I feel like that's helpful too.
Well, and I think Kaya, it's taken you. So you have a podcast now too, and
Mhm.
I love your podcast graphics. Like I think that's like taking you so far, like you said too, in other places of your business that you're like, oh, I didn't realize when that was going on. Or you when you worked for the Kentucky Beef Council, you were doing media place like ads and stuff for them too. So like having that exposure before you've gotten to where you are now. So maybe like talk to us a little bit about where you're at in the media now and like what you're
Mhm.
kind of doing, because I feel like not only for yourself, I always see you just like doing loads of things. Like you're always promoting or advocating some way or another.
So, okay, real quick, I'm going to answer your question in a roundabout way, but there's something that you said that made me think of a thought that I wanted to make sure to share before I forget. So, I had talked about how every single role that I've served has now somehow serves me now in the role that I have, even though people wouldn't think like, oh, what does someone that works for the Beef Checkoff have to do with being a life coach? Like those
Yeah.
don't immediately connect. But something that I also want to share with anybody that is maybe in a job or a role right now that you don't think is going to be your forever job, and maybe you're struggling to like find happiness and fulfillment here while you crave or are maybe looking at what the next step looks like. What my grandpa told me when I started my young professional career was, think about your job as being paid to learn. You are being paid to learn. And I loved that perspective because in the moment when I was like, man, I just wish that I could be my own boss and own my own business one day, and I got frustrated, I would remind myself like, no, this is where I'm at today. I can work towards that. But today, look at all the skills that I'm honing and fostering while also being paid to learn those skills. And now, you mentioned media. So over the last couple of years, I've been fortunate enough to have some really incredible media exposure. Last summer, I had a feature that was in People magazine in the June issue of 2020. I was on a segment on Good Morning America, Access Hollywood. It kind of like snowballed into this crazy way. And earlier this year in 2021, I had the incredible honor of being a guest on the Kelly Clarkson show. And what was so cool about that experience, I mean, outside of the fact that like that's just freaking cool in general, but I felt so prepared. Don't get me wrong. I was nervous. Of course, I was sweating through my dress. Don't get me wrong there, but I was so prepared and I felt so much more confident to get on stage on national TV because I had all of this experience at the Kentucky Beef Council being in the media. Like I was that girl on Lexington local news that was cooking up some Super Bowl beef recipes in 2.5 minutes live on air and having to like learn how to be spontaneous and, play off of the other, the morning reporters. And looking back now, I'm like, thank goodness I had all of that media exposure for the little hometown TV stations and hometown radio shows that I did in Kentucky, because in between commercials, Rachel Hollis, who they surprised me with on Kelly Clarkson, her and Kelly both looked at me. They're like, it seems like you do national TV every single day. And I'm just like, thank you, Kentucky Beef Council. Thank you, Kentucky Beef Council. Like, and I would have never thought that those skills would translate so well to what I'm doing now. And I mentioned, you asked where I was at in media currently. Like I mentioned, I had some really great media exposure opportunities, and I have to give a huge shout out to the Beef It's What's for Dinner team, which this comes back to my Kentucky Beef Council role. But the reason that I even landed those incredible stories was because the team at Beef It's What's for Dinner with the national checkoff, they knew my story because I met them when I was in Kentucky. They said, this is amazing, Kiah. You grew up on a ranch, you eat beef, you have this incredible health transformation. You're good on camera. We've seen you do that at the Beef Council. Yeah. Can we pitch your story? And it was thanks to them that I landed all that national media. And so that really helped me kind of build a brand for myself as a coach and really helped me launch my coaching business in a way that I think would have taken me a lot longer had I not had those really incredible opportunities. But when I'm not on TV, which I don't have any plans in the future currently to be on national TV, I really like to continue sharing my message and sharing my story and just adding value to my community through social media, as well as my podcast. So that's where people can see me mostly right now, and just continuing to show up and support and encourage the women that I'm serving.
I have a question for you. If we want to dive into coaching, are there different things people come to you with? I'm sure you kind of see it all, hear it all. Can you kind of share any stories or what you're doing with that?
Yes, absolutely. So, Brenna talked about the niches, right? The riches are in the niches. And when I think broadly about my audience, I think mostly I help women, and I mostly help women who have struggled with their weight, or more specifically, their body image and their relationship with their body. Because what I've realized through this journey is that I used to think, as someone who struggled with my own weight and body image growing up, that body image issues were only reserved for people that looked like me as I grew up. And what I've come to realize is that they are universal for all women. You might look at a woman and think, oh, she's got to be so confident. Look how beautiful she is, how thin she is, how athletic she is. But what I've come to realize is that most most of us women at some point or another have struggled with how we feel in our skin. And what I learned was that so much of how we feel, we think has to do with how we look in our bodies, but really it has to do with how we think about ourselves. And that's a mindset issue. And so I work primarily with women who are wanting to create a healthy life that they love from the inside out, who are ready to kick, traditional dieting and fad dieting to the curb, to learn how to rebuild their relationships with themselves from the inside out. And while I have a very broad audience, with people from New York City and Los Angeles and everywhere in between, within that, I do have a niche of rural women in agriculture. And I think that's because women want to work with a coach who understands the culture that they come from. And there's a lot of different coaches out there, right? And people will resonate with different people. But I think there's something to be said for someone that comes to me as a coach that says, I want to work with you because you know how I feel. And also, that where I come from, that the closest gym might be an hour and a half away. That during harvest season, I can't just, change all of my routines. That, I know you're not going to tell me that I can't eat beef. You're not going to tell me that I can only eat organic. And I think that that is really special to be able to have that personal connection with that niche within my community as well.
I feel
absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead, Brenna. You got it.
No, I love that. I love, like you said, like connecting with people that are in the same like mindset that you are. So if Rachel has a question, we can like come back to the coaching. My question is going to be about mindset. And like you talk a lot about mindset and weight loss and like how you think about yourself, how you think about your body. But do you feel like having that positive mindset, changing your mindset reflects in like business and entrepreneurship as well?
1000%. Ultimately, I believe that mindset is what influences every aspect of our lives, whether it's our own relationship with our bodies and how that manifests with our healthy habits and how we treat ourselves, whether it comes down to our relationships that we have with the people that we love, our spouses, our friendships, our family relationships, or whether it comes down to business. And I felt like, I started my health journey end of October or in October of 2018. And I felt like that first year, especially, I was so focused on mindset as it related to my body and my health. And I saw incredible results in my life. I really blew my own mind in a really big way. And what I realized in that journey was, oh my gosh, wait, this overflows into every aspect of my life. And so then when I started my entrepreneurial journey, I was really able to use those exact same mindset tools that I was learning to better my relationship with my body, to really focus on improving how I approached business and how I felt about myself in business. And I use those mindset tools today. I mean, I'm a human, and so I still struggle all the time. And I felt like when I became a coach, I had this like feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm a coach. I shouldn't be having these negative thoughts. I shouldn't be feeling this way. And then I realized, oh, wait, Kiah, you're still a human being. Of course you have these thoughts. Of course you feel this way. But being able to really focus on creating a really healthy mindset is, I think, what helps me push through the hard parts of entrepreneurship. Because as you know, there are a lot of those parts of entrepreneurship, whether it's getting caught into the comparison trap or overcoming imposter syndrome or overcoming struggles or mistakes or hardships or navigating money and taxes and all these things. I know that it really comes down to mindset at the end of the day for how I'm going to get through that.
So this could be a projection or just like what I've seen, and you deal with it a lot more. So my projection is that men, like as females who are in like maybe this rural lifestyle, we want to start a business, we want to like be entrepreneurs, start a side hustle. When we focus a lot on the manifestation or the mindset of what our thoughts, our feelings, our life should be like, a lot of times there's like some pushback from like the male in our life to be like, well, that's too woo woo, or that's too like whatever. And I say like, especially in the agriculture community, right? Rural ag lifestyle. How do you have any advice for women to like, how can they navigate that conversation with a partner, or how can they take it upon themselves to be like, okay, well, maybe it doesn't work for you, but it's going to work for me. And like, that's what I'm going to do to like help myself. Does
Ooh,
that like make sense?
I am so glad you asked me this, Brenna, because my husband is the sweetest, most supportive person. Okay. But sometimes when I get on my coaching pedestal, he like his eyes glaze over and he just looks at me. He's like, I think this just might be a girl thing. Like, like he doesn't speak the same language as I do. And I probably coach him more than he wants me to. And I try not to do that because that's not my place. You're not supposed to coach someone that doesn't want to be coached, but I just can't help it sometimes. So if someone is feeling that way right now, I want you to know that I see you and I feel you and there's hope. Okay. At the end of the day, I think it's important for us to remember that when it comes to taking care of ourselves, whether it's our physical health or our mental health, emotional health, like that is based on our own choices. And I think for some of us, we can use other people outside of us to kind of be an excuse for why we don't continue or make those improvements. And I used my husband, my boyfriend at the time, as an excuse for a long time for why I wasn't making progress in my physical health, saying, if Brent doesn't hop on board, then I can't be successful because I can't do this alone in our household. And some people might be feeling that way too when it comes to this mindset work. They're like, well, if my husband, my partner, my friend doesn't hop on board too, then I can't do this myself. But at the end of the day, you are the only one that gets to make choices for yourself based on what you think, what you feel, and what you do. And I think we need to give ourselves permission to do this work for ourselves without expecting other people to hop on board. Even if you're thinking like, man, all this stuff that I'm learning and doing on my mindset, like I can tell that it's making me feel better. It's making a huge difference. I just want them to get it too. And if you're feeling that way, I want to tell you that the best way that you can influence the people that you love around you, whether that's your spouse, your friend, your mom, whoever it is, the best way to influence others around you is to just be a living, breathing example of what that looks like next to them. There's this old saying that when the tide rises, all ships rise with it. And I think that that's so empowering because that means that you get to be the rising tide. Even if nobody else in your circle is doing the same things that you are, whether it comes down to your habits or this mindset thing, maybe you start journaling, maybe you start meditating and people are like, what is this wacko doing over here? Like, I want you to know that if you feel that, I'm with you. I know how that feels. But what's really incredible is that when you start taking care of your health and making yourself the healthiest version of you, that is going to naturally overflow on the people around you. And we get to bring our energy to the room instead of matching everyone else's energy. So I just want to empower you that you get to make the best choices for you, whatever that looks like. And we don't have to let other people believe in our dreams in order for us to believe in them for ourselves.
I love that. Everybody like right now, I'm like, Kiah, where can we hire you? Because that was like what I needed to hear in my life.
I was listening.
No, I think that's so perfect.
To one of your podcast episodes, Kiah, and you were saying how going through your journey, there was this advice. It wasn't like new advice you heard, but at that time you weren't ready to hear it or like use it. And I feel like that is also something we need to remember. Like we can't put advice on other people and expect them to like accept it because they might not be ready and it might not be time for them yet. And the same goes for us when we're thinking, we can't like guilt ourselves when we're like, oh, I knew I should have done that. Maybe, we were getting there. So I think that kind of ties into what you just said too. And I think that's really good advice as well.
Yes, absolutely. It might be the right time for you, but it might not be the right time for them. I think that at the end of the day, if we're going to make real lasting changes in our lives, we have to make the choice for ourselves. Other people can't force it onto us and we can't force it onto other people. Like, trust me, my parents tried to help me like take care of my physical health for a really long time growing up and tried lots of different methods, like bribing me with money, offering to give me rewards if I was able to do it. I had lots of external motivators, but what I didn't have was my own personal drive and decision for myself to make. And that's why nothing ever worked. And that's why it took me being ready at the right time for me to take that next step forward. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, Rachel. I think that ties in perfectly with this.
Can we talk a little bit about social media? Because we talk about that quite a bit on our podcast. And like, if you're rural, how social media can connect you with so many people. I'm like, heck, it connected you and I don't even know where I was in the world at the time. You were in California. And then we were able to meet in person during the NFR in Las Vegas. So like, I love Instagram. I love social media for that reason, like the connections you can make with people. Your social media that you're using for business had a massive growth in a fairly short amount of time because of your media exposure. Maybe talk to us a little bit about like navigating a large following and how you're using social media to build your business.
Yeah. So my social media growth, a lot of it did happen really, really fast. I think that the night before my Good Morning America and People came out, I think I had like 4,000 followers on Instagram. And I think by the end of the next day, I had like 17,000 followers or something. And it was awesome, but also so overwhelming. It felt like I had just stepped on stage to like 17,000 people. And I was like, I have no idea what to say right now. And it was so cool, but it was also really challenging to have that growth so fast. And part of it was also the timing and the state of the world. The week that my media happened was the same week that George Floyd was killed. And so all of a sudden, I had this like, incredible growth. And then all of a sudden there's like, I mean, the past couple of years, there's been so much turmoil in the world. And I had people messaging me saying, hey, you have a platform and you need to use it. And I was like, wait, what? No, like what? And it was all of this pressure of like with social media, if you have a large following, when issues come up, whether it's social justice issues or whatever it is, there's always an issue. There's always something going on in the world. People are going to get so mad at you if you say something. People are going to get mad at you if you don't say something. And I felt this immediately the week that I all of a sudden had this like huge platform. And I was not sure what to do. I felt really paralyzed. And so there's some good and bad that goes with it. And what I've come to learn is I try not to be reactive when it comes to social media, because I think that tends to be a thing to do. People are very, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but, there's all this pressure of like, oh, everyone's posting this, I should post it too. And I think that can get us in really big trouble.
Herd mentality.
Yes. Herd mentality. Right. And I felt that at first. I was like, oh my gosh, wait, do I need to post a black square? Like what's going on? And it was like so much pressure. And so, sometimes having a big social media following can also feel like a really big responsibility to carry. And I feel like what I have kind of been learning over the past year is just remembering to be true to myself and what matters to me. And realizing that I don't have to be everyone's news source, and that isn't something that I should bear. And I also need to realize that I'm not going to be for everyone either, that I might have opinions that some people don't agree with. There might be some issues that I don't feel qualified to speak on or particularly passionate to speak on, and that's okay. But I will say that that's been a hard learning curve for me. I am a recovering people pleaser. And if anybody on here is an Enneagram person, I'm an Enneagram 2. So like, I want everyone to love me and I want to love everyone. And conflict makes me like, just like, I don't like conflict. And social media, it's a wonderful, beautiful place, but it can also be a really nasty place. And I think learning not to take things so personally has been a really big lesson for me. And also, I don't remember who said this. I've heard this a million different places, but there's the old saying of like, you could be the ripest, juiciest peach, but there's still some people out there that just don't like peaches. And I have to remind myself of that all the time if I do get negative interactions on social media. But yeah, so that's how my social media kind of grew a lot from that media exposure. And then over time, it's just by adding value. And I really like to see my social media as a place for me to show up and serve my community. And I will say that I do not feel like an expert by any means. And so I feel like I continue to learn daily when it comes to social media, and I have my struggles. I actually, in full transparency, I feel like lately I've been in a little bit of a social media slump, because I think the other thing, there's this pressure of like creating and posting, and social media is so instant, right? In 24 hours, it's old news. And so there's this create and consume mentality that's just constant. And there's so much pressure to have to like keep up, and there's new trends and things are changing, and there's so much pressure around it. And what I find is that I can get really stuck and in a bad mindset space as an entrepreneur when I am consuming social media too much. And when I find myself getting in a funk, it's usually because I'm like, oh, I've been doing a lot of mindless scrolling lately. That's feeding into this comparison mentality. That is all of a sudden I'm mimicking other people instead of tuning in and finding my own creativity and purpose and passion. And so it's it's so beautiful and so good and such an amazing tool, but it's also something that I think we really need to learn how to be intentional with for our own mental health. Because I noticed that affecting me. And actually this weekend, I took a break from posting on social media, which for some people, a weekend break is like no big deal. But for me, I'm usually on it all the time. And so I took a break this weekend and it was so good for my soul. And I'm trying to get back into the habit. And Brenna, I know you've talked about this before, but the habit of creating before consuming. So instead of grabbing my phone first thing in the morning, which is my instinct, right? I roll over because I still don't own an alarm clock like an adult. I roll over, turn off my alarm, grab it, go take a pee and start scrolling, right? Like that's my instant morning instinct. And so trying to set boundaries for myself where I wake up, I go pee. Yes, I'm going to talk about peeing, I guess. And I go and I journal, and then maybe I'll draw or doodle or create something or write something for myself before I allow social media to kind of dictate my day and my mood. And I haven't perfected this, and I don't know if I ever will, but I'm working through that still in real time.
I don't own an alarm clock either, so that makes me feel better. But I do.
I don't either, and
something like I tried to not do that either, because like if you think about when you growing up, you never had a phone and never needed that in the morning. But like ever since cell phones came around, it's like you need it. It's like it's in your hand, it's in your pocket. Like you can't even live without it. And it's like, what? Yes, you can.
And it's been crazy, Rachel. I've been like, first of all, I had this like crisis. I don't know if I talked about this on here, but a while ago that I was like, I thought I was 27, and our friend Britt was like, "Oh, we're gonna be 30 soon," and I was like, "You are, I'm not." And I was like, "Wait, am I 28? Like I've been living almost a whole year, and I didn't realize I was 28." And I was like, "How am I this old?" But I've been having the same thing about like thinking about my iPhone, because my freshman year of college, when Rachel and I became friends and met in our dorm rooms, I didn't have an iPhone that had the internet at our fingertips, right? So like within 10 years, everything has changed so fast. You know, kind of what you were saying earlier, like how do we like know what's going to happen in our business in the next 3 to 5 years, because things happen so quickly. They change so fast. Like shoot, 5 years ago, I hadn't even started traveling with Oli yet. Like my life has changed drastically since then. Like I was still working in TV 5 years ago. So it's crazy to see like how quickly things change and evolve, and especially with technology. What I like what you have done with social media though, Kiah, is like like you said, you created a community, right? You created, like, you're able to like give them so much value. You just recently did a 5-day free like coaching program that I was part of. And I was like, there's so much inside of that like you were able to give to so many people, and so many people were able to like take advantage of it, but then you were also able to use it as, you know, like a marketing piece of your business as well, to like um to get new clients for your membership, right? So how, and okay, you've taken, I know that you did Amy Porterfield's course classes, right? Like on building a course, right? So maybe just talk to us a little bit about like where you've learned about social media, because I feel like that's a huge part that people maybe miss, that they're like, okay, now I'm a business owner, I should know everything about social media and I should do it, but they don't take advantage of some of the maybe like education opportunities. How has education played a role in your business, and like what are some of the favorite education things that you've done?
Such a good question. And I want to just give everyone I want everyone that's a new entrepreneur that's feeling like, I don't know how to do everything, just to like take a deep breath and release it and just realize that of course you don't know how to do everything, especially if you just started. And I feel like when I started, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm such a fraud. Like, I don't even know how to do this. I don't know anything about taxes. Like I can't be a real business owner. And I remember walking into my accountant's office like the first time, and I like was like, okay, I have a lot of questions, like a whole list of questions. I have no idea what I'm doing, thinking he's going to be like, you have no business owning a business, like no business owning a business. And he looks at me, he's like, of course you don't know this. That's why you have an accountant. And I'm like, oh, I don't have to know everything. So I also want everyone to know that nobody has it all figured out. Okay. I guarantee Bill Gates still has some learning he could do. Okay. So we're all just figuring it out together. When it came to education, especially when I first started as an entrepreneur, I was a bootstrapper. I was not at a place where I was ready to financially invest into all these courses and programs and classes. And there are so many great resources out there that are super high quality that you can pay for, but there's also a ton of great free resources out there that cost $0. So don't let money be the reason that you stop learning. I started really with podcasts. when I started as an entrepreneur, I binge listened to Jenna Kutcher's Gold Digger podcast. And I also binge listened to Amy Porterfield's Online Marketing Made Easy podcast. And still to this day, both of those women add so much value to my life through social media and their podcasts as well. And I really just kind of like learned from them and started implementing things and then learning in real time as I started doing them. I think that sometimes we get into this learning mentality where we just keep learning and gathering information. But I'm going to tell you that you don't actually really learn until you start applying it. So give yourself permission to learn, but also apply it in real time, because that's where you're going to really glean the most benefit from what you're learning, is by applying it and allowing it to be messy when you start. Okay. Like allow it to be messy, just get started. I did, like you mentioned, Amy Porterfield. So she's the one who has the Online Marketing Made Easy podcast, and she is amazing. I just love that woman to death. And I realized when I started coaching, I did one-on-one coaching at first. And I wanted to create a digital course because I wanted it to be able to basically give more women these resources and serve more women inside of my community, because I only had so many hours in a day. And so I invested, that was my first really big investment as a business owner at the time. It felt like, oh my gosh, can I afford this? This is unreal. I don't know if I could pull the trigger. It was $2,000 and it felt like $1 million to me. But I like had some faith and I said, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to make my money back. And so I pulled the trigger, and it was one of the best investments I've ever made inside of my business. And I really do believe that if you make smart investments, it will only bring more to your business and then some. So I created my first digital course last year. And since then it has now transitioned into a membership community. And that too, I learned as I went. I launched my course twice. And what my community said was, hey, this is great, but like, what now? We want more. We want to like stay in touch. Like I have these tools, but like I need some support. And so that's what made me create my membership. And I wouldn't have known to do that had I not just gotten started with the course and then learned and evolved along the way. And so I'm still a huge podcast listener when it comes to learning new resources and tools and tricks and whatnot. And also just following other people that do social media really, really well and learning from them. One of the women that I've recently started following, who is a business coach and has created some really amazing businesses, is Susie Holman. And I first heard of Susie Holman from my friend, Natalie Kavorik. Natalie Kavorik went to one of her masterminds, and now Natalie is hosting her very own masterminds called Rural Rooted, focused on women in the ag, Western, and rural space, and teaching them how to use social media to grow their business as well. So I learned through Susie, I learned through Natalie and some of my friends as well. But I think that the best learning that we can do is by taking action and making mistakes and learning from them.
I fully agree. I love Susie. I love everything she does, and like again, like puts it into like bite-sized chunks that people can just like take action on right away. And I think that's like a huge part of it. But yeah, I feel like we just often run into, especially new business owners or business owners in this rural space, who are like, well, does social media really even matter that much? I'm like, oh, you have no idea, like taking your small community of like, whether it is like 1,000, 2,000 people, and then branching out into like the whole internet. And I think once people get there and they find out too, like there is such a community of like of rural ranch wives, and there's a community of like ag Twitter that people are a part of, and like it can be so community driven. It doesn't always have to be like the turmoil that we typically see when we think about social media or like media in general. So I love your take on that.
Thanks. And I think too, there's so much opportunity in community with social media, but also like, I think that we can easily get distracted by social media by focusing on it too much and thinking that all that matters is how many people are following us, how many likes we're getting. And for me, and this is probably different for everybody's business, I want you to decide what your metrics for success are, because a bunch of likes doesn't always mean a bunch of money or sales or return on investment in your business. And I want you to ask yourself, why or how am I using social media to support my business or to support my community? And in the days when I feel like distracted by how many likes I have versus other people or whatever that looks like, getting caught up in the comparison trap, for me, my metric of success for social media is, did this help one person today? Did this support one person? If I have one woman who said, I needed to hear this today, or I never thought about it that way, or thank you so much for sharing this. If it's just one woman, then I'm like, okay, this was all a success and this was worth it. Because for me, my metric of success in my social media is to add value to my community. And what I've realized for social media in terms of like business, because social media can take up a lot of time. And if you're using it for business, yes, add value to your community, but do it in a way that's also going to bring back to your business. For people that start following me on social media, what I've learned is that it takes them about 6 months for me to foster a relationship with them through social media before they become buying customers of mine. And the way that I do that is by showing up and adding value, building up that know, like, trust factor, so that when I do open my membership community, they know whether I'm a good fit for them or not. I've already given them so much value and they're just like, okay, I'm ready to take the next step and have a little bit more of that.
Kiah, I have a question for you. I wonder if I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. So within that 6 months, are there specific things they need to like interact with you or see from you to kind of build that trust? And is there a way we can break that down for our small business owners learning to kind of like take from maybe like a couple ideas?
Sure. So I think the most important thing with social media is I want you to meet yourself where your customers are. And I don't mean just physically, but I mean mentally, because asking someone to buy from you usually takes a little bit of a thought or a mindset shift and a little bit. So as an example for my business, people that start following me on social media, most of them find me because they are at a point where they're wanting to become healthier. And for a lot of women that start following me, they have recently or are still in the dieting industry or the dieting mentality. And so a lot of women, when they first discover me, they are still trying to lose weight, focused on losing weight, focused on being healthy. Maybe they heard my story of losing weight. Maybe they saw a before and after picture and they say, that's what I want. I'm going to start following her. What did you eat? How did you move your body? How can I lose weight too? So knowing that when I have new people on social media, that is where their mind is at. And so I can't start diving immediately into all of these deep mindset things yet, because they maybe aren't even at a place where they realize that it's a mindset problem to begin with. And so remembering that I have to meet them where they're at, which is usually still stuck in this dieting mentality, this dieting culture, meet them there, talk to them where they're at, and then slowly nurture them with time, with my messaging, or realizing like, let's talk about why these diets aren't working for you. Have you ever felt this way? Maybe this is why you're feeling this way. Like helping them have this like mindset shift, like this aha moment of realizing, oh my gosh, maybe it's actually not the food that is the problem. And then by the time I open up my community, and usually I do a free coaching week, like Brenda mentioned earlier, I say, hey, we're going to take a whole week this week. We're going to dive deep into this mindset stuff. We're going to talk about creating a healthy life we love. I'm going to give you tactical action steps. And in that week, I really take them through this mindset journey so that by the end of it, what I've really created is the first mental transformation that needs to happen first, which is, okay, dieting isn't working. That's why I've continued fad dieting for the last 10 years. This is failing me. I know what needs to happen is I need to rebuild my relationship with myself. And by the end of that free coaching week, that's when I say the doors are open if you need some support and community as you do that. And so I want you to think about, like, before clients are ready to buy from you, where is their head at? What are they focused on? Meet them there instead of saying, I have this really great product, because you kind of have to convince them that they need your product in the first place. So take them through that mindset journey that they need before they click buy, if that makes sense.
Yes, that was good. I really like that. It's almost like the shift. This is what you need to do here. Hey, we can help you do that.
Yes. And I think too, like, I think that something that's really powerful with social media is people like to be able to see themselves in other people, right? And so I think that what works really well for me is when I talk about how I was feeling when I started, or how I still am feeling. And it really validates how other people are feeling in the season that they're in. They feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. I have people tell me all the time, they're like, are you in my head? Like, are you literally in my head? You know exactly what I'm thinking. And it's because I'm validating where they're at in those emotions, and people like that. That's what also helps build community and help them feel like, okay, that is exactly how I'm feeling. If she can do this, maybe I can do it too. And I think too, with social media, sometimes we put this pressure on ourselves of like having to have it be all polished and beautiful and perfect. But what I found for me and my audience, what usually does best on social media is when I show up totally honest, totally flawed, messy, imperfect, because that's when they see themselves in me. I think that when we try to be perfect all the time, or always try to be done up, or always have all the perfect graphics, people are just like, oh, I'm being sold to. Like, that's not reality. Like this just, but if I show up with like a messy bun and a cat in my lap and I'm journaling and whatever that looks like, they're like, okay, she's a normal human. I'm a normal human. I can relate to her. I want to learn more from this woman.
Absolutely love that. I think that kind of like ties in well with you were named the 2020 Advocate of the Year, correct? Is that the correct term title?
Yeah, the 2020 National Beef Advocate of the Year.
Yeah. So in getting this title, I feel like what you do, you just said so perfectly. You're just staying so true to yourself, true to your roots. How do you get out there and share your message? In the weight loss world too, and this health industry that is um can be really harsh on the meat and beef industry. How do you get out there and like stay true to yourself?
Such a good question. Um, I I think that it's really about like being honest and being authentic. And I think at the end of the day, people are going to connect with that. And there are a lot of women that follow me that are from the ag and ranching community. And so they really love it because they're like, oh, yes, she's supporting the product that I raise. Like, that's amazing. We love her. But there's also a lot of women in my community that are not connected to ag or ranching in any way possible. And I think me giving them the opportunity to kind of see into that world from a rancher's perspective, but just as a woman who's taking better care of her health, I think gives them a new perspective on what it looks like to be a rancher or how they maybe think about beef or giving themselves permission to eat beef again, which I think is really, really huge. Um, with the beef advocating thing, it's so earlier this year, I had my first Slam article written about me. And I had a reporter from Vice News reach out to me via email, and he wanted to talk to me. He wanted to talk to me in like within the next 24 hours. And I knew that he wasn't going to be favorable of the beef industry based on what he wrote about previously, which is primarily climate change and very much anti-agriculture in general. And so I hadn't responded to him. I didn't have time to respond to him anyways. And I thought maybe he just wasn't going to do anything. And the next morning I woke up to an article on Vice News that said, influencer claims she lost 122 pounds eating beef, but she works for Big Beef. And it was this whole article talking about how I was the National Beef Advocate of the Year and how I was paid off by the big beef industry and all of this stuff. And at that point in time, I mentioned earlier that I'm a recovering people pleaser. Like, I don't like conflict.
Yeah.
And so I was ready to start spiraling. And my husband, who has been involved with a lot of political campaigns in the past, he's actually the one that helped me nip that in the bud and say, babe, congratulations, you finally made it. Like, you've really made it. If people are starting to like write articles against you, that means that your messaging must be really effective. And so I was like, you know what? That perspective feels a lot better to me. So I'm just going to be really, really proud. And I think that is, when you stand for something, odds are there's going to be people that are going to want to stand against you. And I think that can be really discouraging and make us not want to say anything at all, especially in the ag space when agriculture has kind of become the scapegoat, especially for climate change, which is like the number one conversation now, I think, against the beef industry is sustainability and the climate change. And if you're going to be passionately representing agriculture, then you have to know that there are going to be people that are going to passionately disagree with you. And that can be hard to navigate. And I think remembering, like, what do I know that's true? What do I believe is true? And how can I also like hold space to recognize that the people that are against me are also just doing the same thing that I'm doing and sharing what they believe in passionately in their own perspectives. And so I think holding space for both, like holding space for your passion and what is true, but also not allowing the people that disagree with you to bring you down to a place that is not true to yourself. I am not someone who is aggressive or hateful. And so I'm not going to let anybody else's comments do that. I did get my first death threats after that article in my Instagram DMs, which was super fun. But I think too, being compassionately curious about like, what is going on in this person's life if they feel the need to reach out and threaten to kill someone on Instagram that they don't know? Like, I hope that he has a good day today. Like trying to like remove yourself from it a little bit. But I think just like showing yourself and like, yes, I'm an advocate for the beef industry, but it's also because I grew up on a ranch. It's because my nieces are growing up on a ranch. And I think humanizing the story of agriculture by putting yourself into the story of agriculture can be really, really impactful.
Talk about like a weight to bear when you have such a large following. I think everybody is like constantly like, oh, I want to hit that 10K mark or I want to like get followers, blah, blah, blah. But it's like reality of it is like, I'm kind of comfortable like not having so many people with their eyes on me, especially in this industry, So like there's I am a lot of props to you for like what you do. And I think that often. So
there's that phrase that they say, new levels, new devils. And it's true. I think sometimes we have this perspective of like, it's going to be so much better once, like everything's gonna be so much better once I hit 10K and I can have the product link. Everything's gonna be so much better once I hit this in my revenue goal, once I have this many customers. But I think it's recognizing that life is always going to be challenging. Every level of business is going to be challenging. It's just whatever level you're in or you're on or you're at is just going to bring different kinds of challenges with you. The grass isn't always greener. It's just a different grass.
Oh, I don't know why that made me laugh so much. I'm like thinking like turf. Other grasses. One of the things that I heard you said it just a couple sentences ago, and then I also heard you say in your podcast was the compassionately curious. I
Mm-hmm.
love that phrase, and I'm like, oh, I should try to do that a little more. Can you talk a little bit more about that, or how you like approach that?
Yes. Okay. Compassionate curiosity. I'm so passionate about it that I'm literally putting those words on a product that I'm designing right now for my store. Um, I think that it is one of the most powerful things that we can have for ourselves and for others, for our own emotional and mental well-being. I use compassionate curiosity a lot when it comes to working with my clients, or my coaching community. I think it's so easy when it comes to like us making a mistake, or let's say that someone's trying to like, eat more mindfully, and they hop on the Facebook group and they say, oh my gosh, last night I binge ate half a bowl of Halloween candy. And they go down this deep shame spiral about why it's bad, why they're a failure, why everything's wrong, yada, yada. I think we've all been there. We've all gone down a shame spiral of our own, no matter whatever the action was that you took. And I think for me, the way that we move forward from mistakes or maybe those shame spirals is through compassionate curiosity. Instead of saying, oh my gosh, I'm so bad, I can't believe I did this, I made a mistake. How can we be compassionate of how was I feeling when I binge ate half of a bag of Halloween candy? Oh, yeah, I was really stressed. Oh, yeah, someone in my family got diagnosed with a really terrible disease. Oh, yeah, all of these other things were happening. And if we can be compassionately curious about why we do the things that we do, how we're thinking, how we're feeling, and how that shows up in our life, I think that that's where we can create some more awareness over really the way that like our actions are very tightly related to our thinking and our feeling and our emotions. And if we just continue to like judge ourselves, we're never going to be able to work through and heal that. I really think that the healing is in the feeling. And I think a lot of the reasons why we buffer, whether it's through scrolling through social media or eating or smoking or drinking or whatever it is that you use to distract yourself, I think it's because we're usually avoiding an emotion that's going on in our body, because we don't give ourselves time to stop and get curious about how we're feeling and what we're thinking to create these feelings. And I think it's just a beautiful thing to remember when it comes to healing our own relationship with ourselves. And I also think it's helpful when it comes to handling other people, right? It's so easy for us to make assumptions about other people. And if someone is a jerk, like, is it okay for people to be jerks? No. But if someone does something to you, you get to decide how you're going to think and feel about it, right? Nobody else can make you feel anything. Only your own thoughts can do that. Nobody, like, you can't make anybody else feel anything. Only their own thoughts can do that. And so a way for you to protect your own energy, if someone is being a total jerk to you, is being compassionately curious about like, that was really rude that he said that. I wonder how he was raised to make him think that it was okay to share something like that. I wonder what's going on in his day for him to lash out at a stranger like that. Or I just think it helps me navigate life in such a more loving and understanding way. Because I think we're so quick to be offended or so quick to be angry or so quick to feel shame for ourselves that it doesn't allow us to really realize what's going on in a deeper level. And I think this is really helpful too when it comes to the holidays, because Lord knows the holidays can be really triggering with some family and people that make comments. And especially my community, we're talking about it a lot right now, when people make comments about your body. And I'll give you an example. My grandma has been notorious for making comments about my body ever since I was a little girl. And it used to make me really mad and really hurt. And compassionate curiosity has really allowed me to totally reframe the way that I feel about that, and realizing like my grandma is in her late 80s. And she has been on a diet her entire life because she was raised to believe that beauty looked this way, that you are only worthy if you have a body of this size. And that does not have to hurt my feelings. If anything, it can just make me feel so much more compassionate and loving towards her. And like that mindset and relationship that she's had with her body for the past almost 90 years. And compassionate curiosity is what allows me to reframe that relationship instead of it meaning something about me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it ties into what you said too earlier, way earlier, like we can't always take things personally either.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good way to not do that when you can be compassionately curious and think about it, think it through.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Of course.
I love that. I feel like everything you do, everything you say is like so intentional, and it's like there's so much more behind it than just like the surface level. And I think that people can gain a lot from that. So if people want to learn more about you, listen to your podcast, join your community, where can they do that at?
Yeah. So obviously you guys like podcasts because you're listening to this one, and I have my very own. It's called Climbing with Coach Kiah. You can tune in wherever you're listening to this podcast. I'm also on social media on Facebook and Instagram as Coach Kiah. Instagram is my personal favorite place to hang out. I'm also, you can check out my website, coachkiah.com, and join my email newsletter. I email you every Wednesday, and my community opens up once a quarter. It's called Climb. There's kind of like a climbing mountain theme going on here. But my community opens up every quarter. I'll be opening up at the beginning of the 2022 new year. If you're interested, we'll be doing another free coaching week, so you can kind of give it a try and see if it's a good fit for you. But I would love, love, love to connect. And hopefully next year, I'm also hoping to do my first ever in-person event. So stay tuned for that.
Fun.
Very exciting. Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to chat with us today. We totally appreciate you.
Thanks, ladies.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Rural Rundown podcast.
Thanks for listening. You can always find us on social media at the Rural Rundown.
And if you really liked this episode, we would totally love it if you gave us a review and gave us a little rating.
It would mean so much to us. And for more small town roots and business savvy, catch us on the next one.